Welcome, my Phoenix family, to One-Footed Phoenix. About 3 years ago, I was faced with one of the toughest decisions, honestly, of my life. I could continue to live with the intensity of CRPS, or complex regional pain syndrome, or I could amputate my left leg. Amputation for me was a big deal because it meant that my life would be forever altered, and once the leg comes off, it's pretty hard to put it back on. So whatever the reason that you're facing a possible decision to have an elective amputation, or whether your friend or your family member is facing that decision, you're not alone. You are already loved by this whole community of amputees who are happy to answer your questions you might have about making your decision about amputation. Amputation isn't a decision that I took lightly. You should also give yourself as much time as possible to learn about the risks and the rewards of having an amputation pertaining to your specific condition or situation. Today, I will give you an example of the pros and cons that I listed out in my process of choosing to have my leg amputated. One of the biggest pros for me to having my amputation done and to learning to live with and love my little nubbins here was the fact that I knew that amputation had a much better success rate of giving me the quality of life that I wanted back, but also giving me the mobility that I wanted back again. And not just those things, but it also had a high chance of hopefully giving me a life with less pain. Now, I didn't say no pain there. I said less pain. And it's important that you remember less pain, because on the con side, I also listed out that I could end up with phantom limb pain. And I actually did end up with fairly severe phantom limb pain. And despite that, I'm still really happy that I made the decision to amputate. And 3 years later, my life is in a better place than I could have imagined back when I was in the hopelessness of CRPS. A major con for me in choosing amputation was that it could mean less pain. And that could also mean that I have to take less pain medications. And while I still take a good amount of pain medications to manage phantom limb pain, I also am very grateful that those medications actually have been fairly effective in treating the phantom limb pain. And that even though I need those, I can still do things in my life. And yes, I need the medications to help me be a functional adult. Unfortunately, that's the reality of phantom limb pain sometimes for some people, especially when they have it on the more severe side like I do. But that doesn't mean that I don't have less pain, because I do. I'm able to walk around, I'm able to wear my legs sometimes, and other times I choose to use my chair just because I want the stamina to be able to be out pretty much all day doing something. And that's totally okay. One of the pros of having an amputation with a limb that had CRPS in it was the fact that there was a good chance that CRPS would not spread under proper care. And what I mean by that is sometimes CRPS does spread to other limbs, and then you get that really bad burning and stabbing and just horrific pain that comes with CRPS. I found that a good positive to having an amputation for myself would be that I may have increased ability to do school, go to social events, and also to really enjoy the outdoors. And being able to enjoy the outdoors is a big one for me. I have always been a very outdoorsy person and a lover of nature. I've also been a person that really loves to photograph nature, and so being able to get back out to something that I loved so much and that had been taken away from me by the intense chronic pain was very important to me. A positive of having an amputation may be that I may be able to walk some with the help of a prosthetic leg. But on the other side of that, the con is that I may not be able to use a prosthetic leg. And a major con would also be that when you use a prosthetic, or when you try to adjust to a prosthetic, especially when you have CRPS in a limb, you have a higher chance of not being able to use a prosthetic as much as you would like to, or you have a higher chance of not being able to use your prosthetic all day. And I definitely fall into that category of not being able to use my prosthetic a whole lot, but I'm grateful for the time that I can spend in my prosthetic leg, and I would not have that had I not chosen to amputate. A good major positive for me is the fact that phantom limb pain is rated at just a little over half of the McGill pain scale from CRPS. Complex regional pain syndrome is rated at the very top of the McGill pain scale, and it is rated in that zone where there is no true approved treatment that actually really helps CRPS, or there's no specific cure for CRPS. And for phantom limb pain, there are things that you can do to help manage it a lot better than you could manage CRPS. A positive I found is that even if I spent a lot of my time using a wheelchair, I realized that, hey, you know what? I can still have a really good life, even if I use a wheelchair 99% of the time. I can still have a beautiful and fulfilled life. And I think a lot of people, when they are considering amputation, they don't even really want to think about having to use a wheelchair most of the time, because they're like, well, I'm amputating my legs so that I don't have to be in a wheelchair all the time. But hear me out here. You may have trouble with a prosthetic, and that's okay. And I want to send the message that even if you have trouble with a prosthetic, there's no shame in you using a wheelchair because you need it. I mean, you need a wheelchair just as much as anybody else that's paralyzed in some cases if you can't use a prosthetic very well. So don't be ashamed of your mobility aids, whatsoever. A major positive for me was also that ketamine treatments helped to save my knee from also having to be amputated. And you may be able to avoid needing an amputation through the use of bisphosphonate treatments. Those are the experimental treatments that I have been getting from my doctor post-amputation, but they have really helped me with my lingering CRPS symptoms, and they've also really helped me to be able to be more comfortable in wearing my leg for longer periods of time. For me, that is what gives me my life back. One of the cons to having an amputation is that, yeah, you are going to need some sort of mobility device where you go. Even within your own house, you're going to need crutches, a wheelchair, a prosthetic, a walker, some sort of way to get around in your home, but you're also going to need some sort of way to get around when you leave your home. And sometimes that can make traveling kind of tough because you're going to need mobility aids, and through an airport, you're often going to need to be patted down and have extra security through an airport. And also, just traveling by car, you're going to have to bring extra mobility aids, maybe even a shower chair if the hotel or place you're going to doesn't provide one. So it's definitely something to think about of yeah, if I want to travel all the time, that's going to be a little more difficult logistically, but it's doable and very enjoyable. It can be for a lot of people that have disabilities. A con to having an amputation is that you're probably going to need a wheelchair ramp or a wheelchair lift in your home. And I say this because a lot of times you're going to run into different situations where you're not going to be able to wear your prosthetic leg, or where something breaks on your prosthetic and you need to leave it somewhere to get repaired. So it's always good to have a backup plan for how you can get in and out of your house, but also how you could use a wheelchair if you're in a situation where you don't have anything else. Something else to think about with having an amputation is that you're probably going to need main floor living fairly quickly after having your amputation. Even if you're a really, really active amputee, it's going to be difficult for you in those times that you need to be resting without your prosthetic leg on to move about your own house. So I definitely recommend and highly suggest to new amputees that if you don't currently live in a place that has main floor living, it may be time to think about selling your home or moving out of your apartment to somewhere that's going to be more ADA friendly. And have main floor living, all of the laundry on the same level, the kitchen on the same level, the bathroom on the same level, and the bedrooms on the same level. You're going to have a lot of physical therapy after amputation, and you're probably going to have a lot of prosthetic fitting appointments as well. So all of those doctor's appointments can kind of add up, and sometimes you're going to need a driver to some of those, especially right after amputation, because a lot of times you're going to be fighting with the pain of just having your leg cut off, which obviously, as someone who's been through it, I know that it's not the most comfortable thing to be on pain medication. but also that it's not safe for me to be driving when I'm that like drugged up on pain medication. So that's something to keep in mind as well. And then lastly, you know, this is just kind of a fact you should know before you have an amputation, is that most insurance companies, at least here in the States, they do not cover running blades, racing wheelchairs, or any sort of specialized sports equipment that you see people like in the Paralympics using, for example. Or just like a lot of people think like, oh, just because I'm an amputee, I can go like run races and stuff. But the truth to that is that it takes a lot of skill and discipline, and oftentimes those people that you see in the Paralympics are being sponsored by other companies that want to help them do the sport that they love so much. Not all disabled people are able to be Olympians, just like not all able-bodied people are able to run a really fast marathon in the Olympics. So if you learned something new or something cool today or something helpful, I invite you to go and watch another One-Footed Phoenix video right here. I'll see you all in the next video. Bye!